Hi, everyone. This is Michael from the Long Ways Podcast, and I'm going to be here today talking with Devin a little bit about the Colorado Trail. This is kind of exciting for me because I'm never really allowed to host any of our podcasts. I'm usually sitting and doing the color commentary in the background. So this is a new experience for me, but it's going to be great because in our last episode, you heard a little bit from my daughter talking about an inspirational trail that she was on, and now we're talking with Devin. And don't worry, this is not going to become the Windlespec show. We've got a lot more fun things coming for you about these inspirational trails. And I really like this series. I'm really getting into it, and I think you will too. And so, gotta say hi to Devin real quick. Hi, Devin.
Hi everyone, it's fun to be on the other side of the microphone doing the answering the questions instead of being the interviewer right here.
And so Devin did give me a series of questions to ask, which I have no intention of asking whatsoever.
Ever the
So,
journalist.
so we're going to go get you started. And I'm really glad for this trail, Devin, that you've picked because you and I have spent many, many, many years. Our whole family has, by the way, just hiking around the Appalachian Mountains and taking hiking trips. But this trail for you, I think, was a pivotal one for you. So I'm just gonna, first of all, I'll go ahead and let you name the trail that you're gonna be talking about today.
Yeah, I'm actually talking about the Colorado Trail, which, as per the name, goes right through the middle of Colorado, through the Colorado Mountains. And this is actually, I hiked this trail a decade ago, which is crazy to think. I am 28
Yeah.
now. And a decade ago, I would have been just preparing. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Or just getting off of the trail. Um, I hiked this the summer after my senior year of high school, just before I went to college, with three of my best friends from high school. That's
Okay. And this was not the first adventure you had planned with them.
no.
You planned a different one, which luckily did not happen. So
Well, we did the high school thing, which is, we wanted to do something big before college, and these were all I was a cross country runner, and these were cross country friends of mine. They're still friends of mine today. And it was me, Silas, Gabe, and Andrew. Shout out to you guys if you're listening. We hiked we attempted, let's put it that way, to hike the entirety of the Colorado Trail over a summer, right after high school.
great. And I remember, I remember you planning this one and the amount of detail you went into. And all four of you are quite characters.
Yeah.
So I would love to be able to get Andrew and Silas and Gabe onto a podcast at some point too. They're all amazing hikers and amazing young men. So when you set out to do this, you had many choices of things you could do, right? I mean, for a long trail, obviously, where we live, the Appalachian Trail was, is always one. But why did you pick the Colorado Trail? What was that draw to Colorado?
Yeah, so we were between a few trails at the time. So originally we wanted to, buy a van and drive across the country.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do remember.
this was, pre kind of Instagram. So like van life was like a blogging thing at the time. And we wanted to do van life and then we had no money and that wasn't going to happen. Um, and so we decided on doing this go hike a long trail. We had like, this idea of like being out in nature, I was very much of the age where I was very inspired by like Into the Wild and that kind of stuff. Jack
Right.
Kerouac, that kind of stuff going on here. You're an 18-year-old boy. These are the kind of things you read. And we were between two trails. We had like a time limit. We couldn't do the Appalachian Trail because we couldn't, spend 8 months. We had like 2 months of summer before we all had to go to college, which kind of limited the trails we could do. So we were between two. We were between the John Muir Trail in California and the Colorado Trail in Colorado. And we settled on the Colorado Trail. I think it ended up being a logistical call at the end. I think the John Muir Trail was the one we wanted to do, but you had to buy like passes in advance for that one through the national
Mhm.
parks. And I don't think we were able to get that in time. So we decided to do Colorado instead. And the Colorado Trail is meant to be hiked from Denver to Durango, north to south. But there was a freak last minute spring snowstorm. So we had to reevaluate all the plans and do it south to north. And that is not how the trail's supposed to be hiked at all. Um, but it was actually kind of a really unique experience because we were doing it really early in the season. We were doing it like uh, May, end of May, early June. Um,
Right.
and because we were hiking it south to north, we were also kind of like not hiking with other people. It was just the four of us. Because people starting the trail in the normal time, like 2 weeks later would have done it, the opposite way. Um, so it was a really cool kind of experience to be up there in the tops of, the Colorado mountains. The San Juan Range is what it was called. Kind of alone for about 3 weeks.
So I'm going to ask you a quick question, kind of a trick question, actually. So how did you actually prepare for this trip?
Not well. And the thing about this trip
I
was
mean, a
that this was my
reminder that
first.
you were 18 too, so this is actually pretty
Yeah.
comical.
Yeah. Well, we did like a couple of like putting on backpacks and hiking around. Like we're from, Western North Carolina. We have mountains around. We would hike around that a little bit. But I had never done like an overnight backpacking trip in my life. And so, what Dad and I do now is more of a hiking between like, mountain huts or hostels. But this, hiking, sleeping in a tent every night for a month, never done that before. So the answer is I didn't prepare, and I think it kind of bit me in the ass. But you're also 18, and you can kind of like survive that a little bit more, when you're 18.
Yes, I do remember talking about this and you saying, oh, say, well, we're used to hiking in the mountains. I'm thinking, okay, these are different mountains we're talking about here. Our highest peaks get to 5,000 feet, maybe a little bit more, right? Yeah, a little bit here and
Yep.
there. And the last comments I got from you before you went on the trail were, damn, are these mountains high?
Yeah.
Because they're outside of Durango, or it's like a vertical. So yeah, so hiking at elevation also became a challenge for you, didn't it?
Yeah, I remember we the way it started, this like it's kind of weird how, memories of something like a decade ago work, but there's this very vivid like sections of the trail that I remember really well. And then other times where it blurs. And like the first 3 days or 4 days are a really vivid section. And I remember like each day we were moving higher and higher into the mountains from Durango. And like by day three, we were camping up at 12,000 feet of elevation by like this alpine lake, like right, kind of like in this little like cup of mountains at the very top of the peak. So by like day 2 or 3, we were climatizing at like these a pretty significant elevation. I think the highest we ever got was about 13,500. It was right under the shoulder of Mount Massive, which is a 14er. Um, so we were high up, and especially like going up some of these mountains, like some of these passes. I remember this one called Engineers Pass, which was completely snowed over at the time. Um, we were unprepared, and it took it took a toll on my body. I
Mhm.
remember that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was. I still think the most challenging hike I've ever done in my life, by far.
So real quick, okay. I mean, just to kind of paint a picture for everybody here on this trail, I mean, there's four of you there, okay. And one of the things I really did appreciate with this group was the fact they did keep in pretty good communication with us when they could. They also set up drop points where which you could send them supplies into these little towns, which was
Hmm.
very useful, mostly because
Yep.
they had a very poor diet in the beginning, and they were like, send us anything with protein. Like,
Well,
okay.
we were again high schoolers, so like we were eating like ramen and like Kraft mac and cheese on the trail, like
Exactly.
which you
Yeah.
shouldn't do.
So
You should buy actual good food on the trail.
exactly. So, but I just want you to take like a quick walk through like what a typical day was. How did you do?
Yeah.
What was the logistics of like one of the days?
Yeah, so like kind of how the trail worked, and a lot of through hiking works this way. American through hiking, which is a little different from, we do more like the European hut to hut kind of hiking. We find that that's what's we like the most. But a lot of American through hiking is kind of like you do about 5 to 7 days, then you hit a town. And then we would spend about a day or two in the town, rest, and then go on to the next. Um, I made it about two-thirds of the way through the trail, and then I came off because honestly, my body
You were
gave out. I
exhausted.
was I was exhausted. I didn't
But that
prepare the
was
way I
still over
wanted to.
200 miles.
It was close to three by the
Yeah,
end. So the
exactly.
entire
Yeah,
trail is about
yeah. So
500.
it's not like you say, two-thirds of the way. That was a significant two-thirds that you
Yep.
did.
Yes. My two friends, Silas and Gabe, had actually went on and finished the trail about 10 days after that. But a typical day was, you would wake up, you would have pitched your tent the night before, usually by a place of water. Water was the big thing on the trail that you had to constantly um kind of orientate yourself around. And we were using literally like a trail guidebook, the way
Hmm.
that, you and I still use that to be like, here's the water spots, here's the camping spots. We would map out ahead of time between water spots and how much miles we would want to get. And we probably, towards the beginning, we were doing about 10 to 13 miles a day. And towards the end, we were
Hmm.
getting closer to 20 miles per day, which is a lot of miles. Again, the stuff we do is usually close to like the 10 to 13 per day. And what you start the day, you would, make breakfast, pretty early in the morning. We weren't the best through hikers. We would usually be on the trail by like 8. And when, as a through hiker, you should be on the trail by like 7 or 6 even. But we'd get on the trail and then you would you just hike through the day. And we would set up like every hour because I actually was the slowest hiker at the time. We would meet up, take a long water break, pack soft break. Um, and then we would do that, from 8 to like 7 or 8 the following night, summer. So like, you would hike for about 12 hours. And what I remember about that is that, and any through hiker will say this, there's these really high moments that come from that. There's like these beautiful views or these times with friends, and you're having like these really, transcendental thoughts, just really clear headed. And then there's just these massive lows that come, and it can come in the same day where you're really dragging, you're really cranky, you're really exhausted, you don't want to be doing this anymore. Um, and I mean, it's something we deal with on the trail ourselves with what we're doing now, but we would do that. Then we'd come to our water point and we'd pitch a tent and we'd make ourselves like our mac and cheese or something like that. And uh, we'd do that day out and day out for about, 7 to 8 days until we got to the next town. And that was it for about, a little over 3 weeks.
What was your favorite town that you hit? What was it? You talk about these little towns. They were a pretty big highlight because you not only had a chance to reconnect, but also usually stay someplace and get a shower and some food, right? So which one was your favorite, you think?
I actually think that the Colorado Trail was when I realized that the kind of hiking I like to do is the one that actually dips into civilization more than kind of like what we're doing than the just being in the mountains because each of these little towns, like being like these really like out of the way Colorado towns. I mean, Silverton, Creed, Salida, especially like Creed was my favorite. It's this old mining town where when we came off the trail, we actually like, you had to hitchhike into town, which was kind of a fun experience for a bunch of 18-year-olds. But like we were on the back of this pickup truck and you're just going through dirt roads that are winding their way through like the remains of like this old massive mine back there. Um, and you come into Creed and it's just like this tiny little town right up against the mountains, like maybe 100, 200 people. Um, and for me, like that was one of the moments where I was like, wow, I really like these moments, like doing that. Obviously, we couldn't drink at the time we are 18, so like go into a bar and like have like a Coke and a burger. But talk to the locals. When we were hiking it, as a bunch of 18-year-olds, people were really curious about, us. They'd seen through hikers, but they're mostly in their 20s and 30s. And, a bunch of kids just coming in, we had so many times that people were giving us free lifts or giving us, helping us out. And the amount of generosity on the trail was a major highlight of it.
So, basically, you're doing like a rinse and repeat. You're getting up and doing the same thing each day, and so you already mentioned a little bit about those highs and lows associated with things, but um, you guys gradually began to lose some of your hikers, right? Not lose them. I mean,
Yeah.
just that's a terrible thing to say. They weren't lost.
Yeah. No one died. Well, yeah. So like one of our Andrew had to leave because he had a stress fracture on his foot that made him leave on the second town, and then I left on the third town.
Yeah.
Um, and I think with through hiking, the mental battle is huge. And the mental battle is huge
Mhm.
because the hikes we do, at the end of the day, there's a bed, there's a shower, there's beer. Um, and there are some beautiful moments on through hiking where you wake up in the morning and there's the birds around you and the sun's shining and you're in the middle of the wilderness and it's you're up in the mountains and it's perfect. And the difficult part of through hiking is that that's not every morning. there's a lot of mornings where you're pitching a tent in the rain, or, you're trying to scramble to find water when it's, becoming dark outside, or you're waking up and you just hurt and your muscles hurt. You've been sleeping on the cold ground and you stink because there's no shower. Um, and I found that the mental battle was much more difficult than the physical one. The physical one was obviously part of that. I was getting exhausted. I was, my body was I was skinny 18-year-old and I became much skinnier getting off the trail. Um, but it was one that was why it was one of the most challenging things I've ever done. To kind of pick yourself up each day and say, this is going to be hard. Like, again, it was not an easy trail. It was hiking at the very tops of some of the most rugged mountains in America. Um, but it kind of almost sounds like a complaint about the trail, but it really was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Um, like I had like a bunch of like these small moments of like waking up, having pitched a tent over like this cliff face and wake up in the morning and like the sun shining and you have like this, you just see like for miles and miles and miles, just like the tops of these mountains, with like a caribou like herd, I guess an elk herd, just like wandering through the mountains there. Or, like there's a moment of like, just sitting around with your friends around a fire. Um, and by fire, I usually mean like a butane stove because we rarely had time to build a fire. And, and talking and like, sharing any moments from the trail. Um, and for a young man to go out there at 18 and finally be away from your family and to do something like that and do it and show that you can be independent and show that you can do it alone. Um, it instilled a lot of confidence in me that would go on to like the rest of my life. It became easier to travel after that. It became easier to be on my own after that. Um, now, when I'm like, I literally draw a through line to the fact that like for my journalism, I travel a lot. I'll be in like Istanbul or I'll be in Cairo alone or something like that. And I can do it. And I
Yep.
draw it back to that. I draw it back to knowing that something can be difficult and challenging and I've done it before. Um, and so I think it was huge for me. It was a huge moment in my life. And for all the challenges of it, um, I wouldn't, I wouldn't go back for a moment. I sometimes wish I'd finished the trail. And I've always thought about going back and finishing like the last like, 2 weeks of the trail.
Yep.
Um, but as we talked about on the podcast before, sometimes a trail isn't about finishing it. Sometimes it's about the experience of hiking it. And when it's time for you to
Yep.
leave, it's time for you to leave. And that's how I felt about
Yep.
in Salida, which is again about 2/3 of the way through the trail. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
There was a marked difference in you upon your return. You had a lot more confidence, and I really do think this set the stage for you doing things. Going to Northeastern and doing, these study abroad type by yourself, and throughout your entire life. I think there was a big change in that, and yeah, it was difficult. You did drop some weight,
I
and
just could not afford to drop weight back then. I actually kind of want to do it now because like I could lose 10 pounds now. I could not
exactly.
lose 10 pounds
I'm
back
looking
then.
forward to our next hike so I can lose some weight. That's what I think that's the way
Exactly.
I look at
Our
things
weight
now.
loss program every year.
So so let's just say somebody's listening to this right now and they say, hey, that sounds like a cool trail. It sounds like it was really inspirational in the photos and the stories and of this. We're following along as parents. It was pretty amazing. But if somebody else came to you and said, I want to be able to do this trail, what would you tell them? What should they know? Or how could they be better ready to experience the Colorado Trail, this massive trail,
Mhm.
since you are now, a person who's done that?
It really matters who you bring on with you. Um, I had fights with pretty much all my friends on the trail at one point. Um, and you have frustrated moments and you have conflict and being with people who you can go through the hardest moments on the trail with and still be friends afterwards. And actually your friendship strengthens. Like these guys who I did it, they're still some of my best friends today. And a lot of it was because of this trail.
Yeah.
Um, that's massive. If it's one person, if it's two people, um, go with people who you feel like you can hit, not just like who you like, but who you can hit the highs and the lows with over the course of 3 to 4 weeks. I'd say that for any trail, really. I
Yep.
mean, I've definitely got through some highs and lows with our team on the trail, but it's almost like doing like a through hike like that is like it's that times like 10 of like the level of like, you know, you really need people who you can trust. Um, the second thing I'd say is it's really challenging. Take it at your own pace. A lot of through hiking, people treat it as a race. You have to get here by here. You have to get here by here. If you're doing 10 to 13 miles a day and that works for you, do it that way. Really hate, I actually know, I say I really hate the idea that like through hiking is like a gonzo exercise. It's about taking the time in to see the mountains, to have that experience. I have like all these, small memories, like this one valley I still remember I called Rivendell because it was just like 1,000 different waterfalls coming down from the mountain, trickling into this one river that was like ringed by aspen trees. And we camped right there. And I was like, this is the most beautiful place I've seen in my
Hmm.
life. And it was like 4 days into the trail. And like you don't get experiences like that otherwise. Um, and so I would say like take your time with it. You know it's going to be really challenging. And also I'd say like know that it's okay to leave when you feel like you've got the experience.
Hmm.
If the experience gets you all the way to Denver, amazing. If it's 3 weeks in and you're like, that was the experience, that's good. That's
Hmm.
fair. I say that for any
Yeah.
hike. I really I think there's a point in completing a hike, and if you can, I think you should. But if there is a point in which you're like, this is it for me, that's still doing the hike, you know?
I think it's great, Devin. And this is I know this has been a great experience for you, and we have some more experiences coming up here, coming up this spring.
Yeah.
But one of the things I like best about this series is already just hearing the stories from the people who've done it. And like we always tell people, we are not professional hikers. Okay. But if we can do it, you can. And these experiences and this type of growth that you experience from this is amazing. And doing it at 18 is also. So, is there anything else you
I mean, it was dumb to do it at 18, but it was incredible doing
We
it at
all
18 for
thought
two
so
things.
too. Okay, especially when you're
Yeah,
told you're going to be eating peanut butter wraps for 30 days.
that
Okay.
was our
And
lunch,
I've
peanut
I've
butter
seen
wraps.
you, I've
Yep.
seen the four of you sit down and eat four large pizzas, the week
Yeah,
before. Okay,
exactly.
but whatever. Okay. We're fine with that. And you guys did a great job. But any last words, okay, about the Colorado Trail? And you're
Well,
kind of the
yeah,
editor of this series too, our main host. So what do we got coming up?
I would really say so. First off, with the Colorado Trail, um, I would really point to that as the start of the long ways. So there's a couple of like small starts. We have, Dad and I's first hike on the Tour Mont Blanc. There was the West Highland Way where we finally became our hiking trio, and that really started the long ways. Especially when we started doing this year after year. Um, but I really put the genesis of the long ways at this trail.
Hmm.
Um, because even though it was challenging, even though it was the hardest thing I've ever done, as far as hiking goes, um, it made me fall in love with it. It made me fall in love with being up there in the mountains, with the act of just walking every day and that being all you have to do each day. Um, and the thoughts that come with that, the creativity that comes from that, what you learn about yourself, um, the moments in your life that come from these, like these memories and stuff. Um, and I think that I can draw a through line to that to all the way at the very end of college, 4 years later, saying, okay, I want to go hike as a way to finish college. I want to go hike the Tour Mont Blanc and
Right.
bring dad in on that. And then that, instead of bookending college as I thought, like, okay, I'll start with Colorado Trail and end with the Tour Mont Blanc, started an entirely new thing that we're still doing today. So I would really say that the Colorado Trail started this in a weird way. Um, and that's one of the reasons I'm really grateful for it, is that it has become something that was supposed to be a one-off after high school has led to something that is a, you know, major part of my life now. And one of the better parts, I'm already thinking about the next trail. Um,
Yep.
so
Always do, right?
yep. Speaking of the next trail, we got two trails we're doing this year. Um,
Yeah.
so Dad, you want to tell us about the one that you're going on in April soon?
I am taking a pilgrimage, it appears. So I'm
Uh-huh.
heading back to the England-Scotland border, and this time I'm doing St. Cuthbert's Way. About a six to no, it's about 6 or 7 day hike. Okay, following a pilgrimage. So still learning a little bit about this one. That's going to happen in April. And then this is going to set us up, though. This will be my second Scotland hike for a much longer hike, okay, in July with you and Eric, where we're going to be taking the Great Glen Way, which is the finishing of the West Highland Way that we began earlier.
Yes. So we're really excited about this because it's kind of a full circle for us. Like I said, there's a lot of different starts for the long ways, but one of the starts really is the West Highland Way, where we were hiking trio for the first time, and it became a pattern. And now, 7 years later, I want to say, um, we're going back, and we're going to, hike. We originally hiked from Glasgow to Fort Williams, and now we're going to hike from Fort Williams to Inverness. And it's kind of a homecoming for the long ways team, and we're really excited to return to Scotland and have that experience.
Exactly. Yes, it's gonna be an amazing series of hikes, and we'll be keeping everybody informed. I'd also like to remind everybody to definitely check out our new Substack. So why don't you mention
Yes.
something about that again, real fast, Devin?
Yeah. So again, Substack is a new thing we're doing. We're trying to write about the moments of curiosity from the trail. So a lot of times when we're on the trail, our most recent article is on the White Storks of Portugal. There's like always a question like, oh, that's weird. That's interesting. And what we wanted to do on this is have a place where we can sit and talk about the things that are interesting, that maybe us curious on the trail. So we have one article up there already. Give it a
It's gonna
look.
be fun. We can't wait to hear from all of you about our travels and hear a little bit about your travels as well. So we'll be in touch. And this is Mike Windlesbeck,
This is Devin with respect.
and this is the Long Ways Podcast.